Alexandre Desplat is this year's World Soundtrack Awards Guest of Honor and is also nominated as the World Soundtrack Award Film Composer of the Year for his work on Greta Gerwig's Little Women, Roman Polanski's J'accuse, and Costa Gavras' Adults in the Room. Few modern composers are more prolific, and Alexander has 160 scoring credits alone since the start of the millennium, which has earned him 11 Oscar nominations and 2 Oscars for The Shape of Water and for the Grand Budapest Hotel, as well as a host of other awards. Coming up for Alexander are George Clooney's latest film as a director, The Midnight Sky, his 5th collaboration with Wes Anderson, The French Dispatch, and Guillermo del Toro's animated adaptation of Pinocchio. We are delighted to welcome Alexander to today's masterclass. Welcome, Alexander. It's very nice to see you today. Where are we speaking to you from?
Paris.
Paris, okay. And how has this year been for you? I mean, it's been such an unusual year for all of us, but where have you been spending most of your time, and what's your current situation?
Yeah, it's been strange to have such a different way of life, not being able to go out much, to theaters and cinemas and see friends, Travel to America has been impossible for many months, which is difficult for me because I have things to do over there, but I can't go. But I've been very fortunate to have projects coming to their end, which were ready to be scored, so I could write and I could keep myself busy. Unfortunately, I could not travel for concerts that I had planned. For an opera, I wrote last year a little chamber opera that we played in Japan, and we were meant to go to China. That was cancelled. Concert in Hong Kong and concert in Moscow and many other places that we could not unfortunately reach. So I've been fortunate to be able to write, and so my life has been a bit somehow the same. From morning to evening, writing music. As a composer usually does every day.
Yes. Has it changed anything in the way that you've been working on some of the projects you've been doing? I mean, you've obviously been doing some major features this year. I mean, how has it changed what you're doing on those films?
The major difference and problematic situation that I was in was not to be able to go to my recordings in London for George Clooney's movie. Not be able to conduct, which I always try to do in a studio, and share that moment of discovering the music, hearing it for the first time, and sharing it with my fellow musicians, and being with them, conducting and sweating with them. This concentration, this tension, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't go to London, so the sessions happened through Zoom. It worked, really well. Technically, it was absolutely fine, but it was very frustrating for me. Very frustrating.
I can imagine. Well, look, I mean, we're doing a masterclass with you, and we want to hear obviously a lot about your previous collaborations as well as your current one. I just wanted to start off with a rather broad question, but it is, I think, an interesting one. Do you personally have a preferred method for how you collaborate with directors on projects?
There's not that many methods. There's whether I see the movie early on, and at a very early stage in the editing room, whether I see it at the very end of the editing, whether I see it much, I never see it. It's much before, and it's when the script is being written. And some directors would love the music to be written on the script, but that's not something that I cherish. I like cinema because there are images and camera movements and actors, and I tend to prefer watching the film to its latest version. Of course, I mostly come on the project when the movie has a first draft of editing, and that's where we start. And that's the beginning of the method. Then the communication between the director and composer is made of various things. It's speaking together, spending time together, talking about anything else than the film, having a sense of humor together, maybe, if we can, share jokes, share cups of tea, um, and and actually, my job is to understand what the director wants. So the method is somehow the same. I need to dive into a film as quickly as I can because the time is flowing very fast. It's running really fast, and it's like gold dust. It evaporates very quickly, and I need to react very quickly and project myself into the film, while the director has been projecting himself into the film for months, sometimes years, and I only have a few weeks to do that. So it is of the utmost importance that I can understand what the director wants, what are the traps, what I should avoid that he doesn't like or he wouldn't like, what are the requests that the movie is calling for. Should it be a large, huge score? Should it be a more intimate? Should it be? I know all these decisions that have to come from the director's needs, but also from what I can offer to the director, what I can suggest, right or wrong. But I can have my own ideas and aesthetic about the film that I'm watching without music, because that's very important. I try to see the movie without any temp score, as long as I can, and as much as I can, so that my brain is not influenced. Because vision and audition are very much linked, and if you watch an image, a sequence with the same music more than one or two times, you get hooked to it. So I try to. That's an important moment of my method, to try and avoid that.
Yeah, you have a obviously a well-deserved reputation for being the go-to composer for the go-to composer for a number of very prolific directors. I mean, just to mention a few: Wes Anderson, Roman Polanski, Jacques Audiard, George Clooney, Stephen Frears, but also Gilles Bordos, Florent Emilio Siri, Chris Weitz out of the U.S., Matteo Garrone. They all have their own very different, distinct and different styles. I mean, how, with all these different voices and filmmakers, what do you have? How do you sort of approach when you're first working with them? What's the process you go through in a first collaboration?
Yeah, well, it's part of the deal as a film composer, to be able to not repeat yourself and somehow morph your identity, keeping your integrity, but that your identity can also morph a little bit like an actor would do. George Clooney can play a baseball player or an astronaut, but it's still George Clooney. You recognize him, though he's playing a totally different character. And it's the same for me. I have different characters to play, but I stay myself. I try as much as I can to keep this integrity. And this integrity is what comes from my aesthetics, my education, my musical passions, and it's how my cinephilia, of course, and it's how I kind of summarize all these things together for one very project. What I do is also that I only work on one project at a time. I don't have a team, writing music with me. I write every note of my scores, so I need to focus for the needed weeks on that, and by avoiding instruments that I think are wrong for a film, by choosing subjects, scripts that are different from scripts that I've done before, it allows me to also have a new canvas that I can explore. There will be always some connections with the works that I've done before, and if you listen to Mancini or to Mike Steiner or to John Williams or to Jerry Goldsmith, there is a continuity in the work, even though they were doing a love story or a thriller. So fair enough, sometimes there are two things that bring a composer to a larger dimension. It's when he does the same films, the same type of films over and over, big action films or love stories. And it's also the combination of a director and a composer on the long term. John Williams with George Lucas and Spielberg, Hitchcock with Herman, um, Nino Rota with Visconti, or with Fellini. So there's the director sometimes um, revelates who you are as a composer for films. And I've been experiencing that a lot with directors, with Jacques Audiard, with Polanski, with Clooney. Each time they open my mind to a larger perspective that I would have maybe anticipated.
And can you expand on that? So when you say they open your mind to a different perspective, I mean, and can you give some examples, like how that would have worked maybe with George or with Roman on a particular project?
With Roman, on each movie, it's an exploration, because his perception of music in films is so accurate and so smart, and with so much passion, because he's a real music. I would say he's a musician. He's not a musician, but the way he feels music is so strong and so deep in his heart and his body. You can feel when he listens to music, there's something, it's like blood in his veins. There's something vibrating. And George is like that too, because George Clooney had his aunt, Rosemary Clooney, brought him into loving jazz and music and being surrounded by musicians. And there are these people, they are really musicians without being musicians. And it's always fantastic for a composer to feel so much passion, sensitivity, emotion. Daniel Auteuil is another one, a French director and actor. Gilles Bourdos also. You can feel that when you try together to build something that you're inventing on the moment together that fits the picture, it's special. So there's many examples where you decide at the spotting session that the music should start here, and when you work with the director, he's so open-minded, and then the music doesn't start here at all; it starts later, and then we try again another spot. Oh, it could be fun to do this. There's a even with Wes Anderson, there's this kind of playground, and it's the most exciting moment when you are together sharing this playground and not just doing a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, like, because you do work with so many filmmakers on a regular basis. I mean, what do you know that relationship is going to last very early on when you meet somebody? Do you feel like you have that creative, collaborative spirit with, say, Wes Anderson, who you've now worked with 5 times, George Clooney, Stephen Frears, all these filmmakers who you've worked with multiple times? Was it clear from the start that you were going to have like a long and lasting kind of collaborative relationship?
I've learned long ago that you should never expect to have a second relationship with a director. Sometimes not even a first relationship, because sometimes you meet a director and he's all excited about working with you and he never calls you back. So I think it can happen also on a second film. And I've experienced that long ago, and I can't say that it's not still, a bit pinchy and a bit difficult, but you have to live with it, and you have to be. You should not expect a second collaboration. You should be focused on the first one. Comes what's next. You never know.
And so I mean, also your career has, it kind of straddles both European and American productions. I think since The Girl with the Pearl Earring, you've now regularly worked in the US. You do regularly work with US filmmakers. Do you see a significant difference between working with a US filmmaker and a European director on a project? I mean, are there any big differences that you can sort of specify, or that you notice in a relationship, or is it just down to the individual filmmaker?
No, frankly, yeah, the one-to-one situation is always the same. When you're working with the director, could it be British or American or Italian or French? It's the same man-to-man exchange and artist-to-artist exchange, where you try and imagine the best for the score and for the film, what works as a film score and what works as music, and that's my part of the challenge. What is different in America is the surroundings, is, you know, the budget allowed for the recordings, the size of the studios, the impact of the producers or the studio executives that can have a voice, which of course is much less in France or in Europe, where the director has the final cut. But aside from that, my job is the same. The other thing is also the amount of music that you can find in an American movie that you usually don't find in a European movie. As a cultural thing, you know, the European cinema has a more minimal use of music, more surgical, I would say. But it taught me a lot, actually, and it did. That's why I never stopped writing for European cinema, because that's the cinema that built me as a composer for film, and it taught me a lot of things that I've been using in American cinema, of course. And many of the directors I've been working with are you know, have been also taught or elevated by European cinema, by the Nouvelle Vague, by Truffaut, by Godard, and name all the Louis Malle, all these great directors, or the Italians, Fellini, Rossellini, Visconti. And when I speak with Wes Anderson or Chris Weitz, it's all part of their language. They love that, you know, this cinema, and so it's not like we were talking of a different culture. We're talking about cinema, and cinema is the great thing about cinema. It's all over the world. It's a language that is universal.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, you described yourself as a real cinephile, and you know, your love and kind of knowledge of cinema is one thing that, you know, helps you, I guess, form a you know, a very open and intimate connection with filmmakers when you're speaking to them. I mean, can you cite any examples maybe recently where that, you know, that knowledge is so useful when you're collaborating with a director, where your sort of knowledge of cinema or previous film music really has an advantage for you in terms of your collaborations?
Not just out of my mind, just precisely, but of course, when you watch a film for the first time with a director, you see where he's coming from. You can tell what are his references. If he's looked a lot at Orson Welles or at I don't know, John Huston, you know, and you can tell not only with the photography and the camera moves, but also by the way he directs the actors, the way they move, the way the body language, the way they stand by the camera and watch the other characters, the way the camera turns around them or not, if the camera is steady, and all these things, you know, that create what is the style of a director, which is his point of view. What is your point of view as a film director? So we can share, references, of course, and I can share also musical references with them when I want to say something that I can understand above from what is writing music, which is a pencil and paper. I can give examples or references I can understand. If I mention, I don't know, a scene of Ran by Takemitsu, the music by Takemitsu, they know the film, so they can understand what I'm talking about. Or if I mention Herman and Hitchcock, there's immediately a connection that makes sense. Or Delerue with Truffaut, it makes all sense, and we can easily adjust or take ways, even though I will make curves, and the director might also make curves through that path, but it helps.
And maybe we can talk a little bit more specifically about some of your collaborations. So, for instance, Wes Anderson, you describe working with him as being in a playground a little bit. And, you know, French Dispatch is your kind of fifth collaboration with him, which started on Fantastic Mr. Fox. How has that relationship evolved over 5 feature films? I mean, is it very different from what it was at the beginning?
I think it has expanded in the world that Wes offers is so different from any other world. It's his own world. He invented something that many people try to or are influenced by. Let's put it that way. Many directors I can see are influenced by his style. And musically, I think we were maybe gentler when we started with Mr. Fox. We were maybe safer, though they were already installed. The strange instrumentarium, the choir, the strange way of cutting the music into the picture. But as the film came along, this went really, 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 really wild and wide, and with a long depth of field in the options that we could try. And I think that's a great quality for a director, to be able to have no boundaries, no limits, and try things that you would never think about. And as a film composer and as a musician, sometimes at the beginning of that relationship, I was taken offside because a chord would be cut in the middle of a phrase would be cut in for a chord change, or we would decide that there would be a sudden change of instrumentation. Things that classically you would not allow yourself to do. But with Wes's freedom, I can do things that I would never have tried before.
We're very much looking forward to the French Dispatch, and of course, you are also worked a number of times with actor filmmakers. I mean, George Clooney obviously being a regular collaborator, but also you previously worked with Angelina Jolie, with Ewan McGregor, but also Greta Gerwig on Little Women last year. Is there a different dynamic in those collaborations?
I'm trying to figure out. No, I think that when they become director, they forget about they need to have this overall view of the project. They can't just focus on the acting. And since I'm a composer who worked a lot in theater and loved the actors and like listening to them and listening to the lines and trusting the acting in a scene between several actors, I don't particularly want to cover their language with music. I think we get along fine on that level, you see. So there's never been any issue on that level, because they really become directors when they are sitting with me. They're not actors anymore. They are for me because I know their faces from movies.
You mentioned earlier that you only work on one score at a time, and in some years you will produce a very impressive level of output. So I just wonder, clearly you like that. You like to be busy. You like to have a number of different projects going at once. I mean, but it feels like there's a lot of work for you. How do you juggle when you have like sort of 5 or 6 major kind of feature projects on the go at once? I mean, how do you manage the schedule? It must be pretty insane at times.
I just, when you become a film composer, you have to make sacrifices, and I'm not the first one and the last one to do that. All the film composers I know, they've sacrificed their private life, their families, their friends, because it's a crazy job, because the deadlines are mad. As I said before, sometimes there's a lot of music to write, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes more on a movie, sometimes 2 hours and a half. And it's a lot of work. You have to spend many hours shut up in your studio, and you can't do much else than just work. You have to be a bit crazy. You have to be a bit of a maniac to be living that life. But I guess from my experience, it's the passion of the two love of my life, which was cinema and music. So I'm just doing what I always dreamed to do, and there's no other way of doing it that I know. Maybe there's another way. I wish I knew. I wish I could do one movie a year, but I haven't been able to do that so far. And each time somebody calls me and I love the project and I want to work with this director, right or wrong, I'm excited. I want to do it, and I cancel my holidays. I've been doing that for the last 20 years.
If you get like an approach from a filmmaker you haven't worked with before, what are the deciding factors in deciding to work with somebody? Is it you obviously said you like a wide variety of work, so is it, if you're working on a different kind of project, or someone comes to you with a animated film or a different kind of film, is it about the sort of nature of the project, or is it about the filmmaker themselves?
It's a mix of so many things. It's the director, what he's done before or hasn't done before, and then you meet him and you feel that you can trust his ability and talent. You might be right, you might be wrong, but it's a challenge, and you try. It could be the amount of music to write in a very little time that is just frightening, and you don't want to do that. It could be a script that you feel that you've already explored in another film, and you feel that you're not the right person to do it at that very moment. Maybe in 3 years' time, like 5 years, you want to go back to that kind of mood. For example, after doing Argo, Zero Dark 30, Syriana, I've explored a lot these kind of films, and it's still too early for me to go to these kind of thrillers. And of course, there's also the production. Where is it happening? Is it in Europe? Is it in America? Who's the cast? Do I want to spend 2 months of my life watching actors that I'm not really too excited about? I don't know. It can be anything. It could be that I'm not. But I've been lucky so far, and some movies were not as great as I expected. But if I was able to choose to do only masterpieces, believe me, I would do that. But there's no rule, because a movie is a moving target. You never know until it's over if it's a great film, and sometimes even when it comes to you, you're not sure yet that the music will help make the film better, or it might make it worse. So it's a very tricky choice to do, but you have to make choices, and sometimes you do the choices that you think are right.
Do you feel like it's in terms of like helping a movie, does that mainly come about when the director really knows what they want, when the music's able to help a movie significantly? Is it about the director's vision?
Well, yes. No, it's when there's a space for the film to inhale the music, and you can feel very early on if the director has this sensitivity about music, because the way the movie is cut and put together, the articulation of dialogue, silence, close-ups, wider shots, gives you a sense. But also, when you read the script, you can already imagine what, if the script is full of dialogues, that there will be not much space for the music. Now, if the dialogue is funny and you want to make a comedy, it's great. You can do it. I'm happy to do a great comedy, though it's very difficult to do. But wow.
Even though you're working on other people's stories, are there any scores that you've worked on that felt particularly personal to you or more meaningful than others? My natural assumption would be a story about a musician might have a particular resonance for you, like the Jacques Audiard's "The Beat That My Heart Skipped," but I don't know if that's too reductive or simplistic to sort of say. Can you sort of say about any score that meant particularly a lot to you?
Matt, this is very simplistic.
Very simplistic. I know. I knew it was simplistic, but I guess my real question is where are there scores that are more meaningful? Yes,
I understand.
Musician is very simplistic. Yes,
I understand. No, of course, it's the script that will or when I see the film finished before even reading a script. When I'm offered to watch a movie that is completed, that is waiting for the score, it's the story and how this story is told. You know, it's like you know, some friends sometimes they tell you a very funny joke, and they're not very good at that, and so it's not funny when the joke is over, because you don't get it, because they can't really tell a story properly. So it depends on the nature of the joke, of the story, and how it's being told. Now, if I read a great story, that I'm learning from in many ways, I'm excited about that. And then if I see or hear that the director that is going to say that story has the talent to do it, it's a great combination. That's where it should start. And could it be about a scientist persecuted by the British government, like in Imitation Game or Alan Turing, or could it be Guy with a pearl earring, you know, a young servant in the 16th century, 17th century? Could it be a war prisoner, like in Unbroken? All these topics are moving, and they show what human beings are, and I'm happy to make a journey with these movies.
You've been an A-list composer for many, many years now. I mean, obviously it will differ from case to case, but in general, to what extent do you have any influence on how the score is treated and edited to the film after the recording sessions and mix are done? Is that an area that you will have a lot of influence as well?
No. Unless I'm in the same city at the same time, and I have a little break from what I'm doing, and I can you know, come by the dubbing stage and, you know, share a moment on a scene with someone if I'm asked to. But I tend to leave to the professionals what they have to do, which is the dubbing stage. They know what they're doing. They're great professionals and they have a great sensitivity about how music should play in the film, and it's up to the director. And my job is done. You know, it's like if an actor would come to the editing room and start asking for his close-ups, it makes no sense. So I hear that some composers go to the dubbing stage and spend all their time there, making sure the music is at the right place. Well, great, but I've usually another score to write at the same moment.
But you do get involved in the you know, how your music's presented on CD, right? I mean, you know, for instance,
Yes, that's another thing.
Yeah, okay. So you're much more involved in the assembly of the soundtrack album.
Yeah, it's two lessons that I was given by Maurice Jarre. He said to me, never go to the dub, or just drop by to have a drink, and take care of your CD, because that's the music that will remain. Whatever the movie is, success, no success, the CD will remain, and it's your name on that CD, and it should be representative of what you were aiming for in terms of quality and emotions and quality of recordings, you know.
Can I ask you a little bit about the as well as composing the score, you're also writing original songs for Guillermo del Toro's animated version of Pinocchio. Is that correct? You've written original songs before, but are you writing all the original songs for that film?
I am, yes.
And how is that?
It's difficult. It's a lot of work, but I love doing that. I love writing songs. I love writing melodies. I think it shows through my scores. When there's an opportunity to write a melody, some scores or some directors are a bit afraid of melody, but when I can, I love doing that. It's a lot of work. It's difficult to write a good melody, and writing a song is another job. You know, you have to compress all your ideas in a small amount of time. You know, 3+ minutes, sometimes less for a film. But I love doing that. I always loved doing that, and actually my first feature film score that I wrote came from a song that I had written for with some friends that was a hit, and it opened me to writing a film score. So songs have always been something that I love to do. But not all the movies are crying for me to write a song. So this time there were many songs to write, and I'm really happy to have done that with Guillermo and this with actually a songwriter, a lyricist with who I've worked in this very first project I was mentioning when I was a very young composer, Katz, who wrote lyrics with me when I was composing songs.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to hearing that. And I know you don't have very much time, so I'm just going to ask you one more question before we let you go. But you know, across a very diverse career, you've written music for film, video games, TV, theater, commercials, even a boy band, I understand. Now, of course, you're writing, you know, your own animated musical, Pinocchio. Is there anything left on your wish list to do at this stage?
The wish list is always to meet great directors, great projects, and spend time with these artists and learn from them and be part of a beautiful project. It's always, you know, when I did The Shape of Water, I was so happy to do a film where the love story is the center. I had not done that for many, many years. And it was a great moment to be able to write a love story. There's not so many movies where you can write a love story seriously. I mean, not just a little romance and other stars in New York, but something with more, you know, drama. All these great movies like Out of Africa, or, you know, all these classics, and it's Casablanca. You know what I mean? Being able to write for a classic love story. There are not so many movies doing that today, and I love doing that.
Well, thank you so much, Alexander.
It's the French in me, I suppose.
French romantic. Well, thank you so much, Alexander. It's really lovely to talk to you. I really appreciate your time, and enjoy. You know, hope the rest of your projects go well, and we all get through this year.
We will.
Ready for next year. Ready? Okay. All right. Thanks, Alexander. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care.